Thanks for tuning in to Bay 3 TV today. I'm Kelly O'Loughlin, and today we're very lucky to have with us Mr. Bill Defoe of the Defoe Shipbuilding Company. I'd like to thank you very much for coming in today.
Well, I'm very honored to have been asked to come in, Kelly.
Okay, and you're up here from Florida for a little while, and we're here to talk about Defoe Shipbuilding, which was once the Great Lakes' biggest source of warships during mainly World War II, and a very important part of the history of Bay City and the Bay Area. So can you first tell us, where was Defoe located?
Well, it was located right next to the New York Central Railroad Bridge on the east side in Bay City. That was the third location in its history, but we had been there for a long, long time. And the property, of course, is still there, but it's no longer a shipyard.
Okay, and your father, Harry, was the person who started it. How did Defoe Shipbuilding begin?
Actually, my father, this dates back to 1905, and he was in education. He, in fact, at 30 years of age, he was the principal of the Park School in Bay City, but he'd always been in love with boats and ships. It was a real life interest for him. He decided to quit and start in that business, so he always said he started with $100 and a set of tools and began in building small boats for fishermen, that type of thing, and from there on just progressed until it eventually wound up with the large vessels.
Okay, how did it grow from being just fishing boats to the Great Lakes' biggest source of warships?
Well, he did a good job, of course, and the boats became more popular, and so he began to increase the size of them. He started a so-called knockdown boat building system where he built, in effect, kit boats, and would make these kit boats and fully assemble the vessel, then take it all down again and ship it to the customer. And these were sent literally all over the world. These were yachts that ran up to 75 feet in length at times. Then eventually, when World War I came along, he had built nothing but wooden boats up until that point. During World War I, at that period, he first got into the steel shipbuilding business, and from there on, went into a variety of ships. In the 1930s, built a large number of very large private yachts. It was a very interesting business, and met a lot of very famous and interesting people in that affair.
Okay, and one of the yachts that he built was the Lenore, a presidential yacht, I believe.
Yes,
can you tell us about that?
When it was first built, it was not built for the president. It was built for a Mr. Sewell Avery, who became the chairman of the board of Montgomery Ward Company, and was very famous worldwide for one photograph that was taken of him during the war in a full page of Life magazine with an Army uniformed man on each of his arms carrying him out of his office because he'd had a little disagreement with primarily President Roosevelt about certain Union activities. Anyway, he was quite a fellow. The yacht was taken over by the government during World War II. Then after the war, presidents of the U.S. had, for a long time, had a presidential yacht, but it was a very large, very old yacht, and it became literally unsafe for use. So they got rid of that, and they took the Lenore and made it the presidential yacht. The first one to use it was President Eisenhower, and she was then called the Barbara Ann. Then when Jack Kennedy came in, he renamed it the Honey Fitz in honor of a famous uncle of his, and Kennedy probably used it more than any of the other presidents. It was run from his home in Maine down to their home in Palm Beach, and lots of use. Then President Nixon used it, and when President Carter came along, it was retired from government service.
Okay, and during World War I and mainly World War II was when you had a lot of business going on there. Can you tell us some of the places that the ships went, maybe some of the battles that they were in?
I'm not too sure of all the battles, but I know they were worldwide, of course, both in the Atlantic and the Pacific. We're having a meeting this weekend in Bay City and Midland of this Patrol Craft Sailors Association, and it's interesting to talk to these fellows. They manned the patrol craft ships, which we built a large number, and they have a lot of interesting stories, of course. Lots of them took place in the Pacific. There was more of a naval war in the Pacific than there was in the Atlantic. I was interested recently to discover from a friend of mine who's a local dentist that he was in the D-Day landing in Europe. His ship was sunk, and he thought that he was lost. He was rescued and taken aboard a ship that we happened to have built. So he saw our nameplate when they pulled him out of the water. That was rather interesting. So they were in a large number, of course, of all the activities during the war.
All right. What was the impact of having a business like Defoe Shipbuilding Company in Bay City?
Well, at the wartime, things were a lot different in Bay City than they are now. We employed, for example, 4,000 people in the shipyard. At the same time, Chevrolet, right next door to us, employed about 4,000 people. Industrial Brown Hoist had large employment. Electric Autolite had huge employment. So those days seem to have disappeared, but it obviously meant a great deal to the economy of the area.
Okay, did you work the whole year around, even in the winter?
Oh yes, very much so.
Really?
In fact, a lot of people from other parts of the country, some have said to me in the past that you must have lost an awful lot of time in the winter because of the cold weather. Mm-hmm. Our records showed that we lost more time in the summer because of the heat than we ever did during the winter because of the cold.
Wow. Okay. Your father was the one who ran it, and you and your brother Tom eventually became owners of it as well. What part did you play in the business?
Well, both my brother and I started full-time in 1939. We were both students in Ann Arbor at the time, and the company got the contract to build the first patrol craft. So we thought, well, it's a good idea now. We'll go home and spend about a year getting practical experience and then go back to college. Well, of course, we never got back because the business just zoomed and there was no way we could go back. Mm-hmm. So we started out simply working there, and then gradually our father gave us further interest in the business, and we wound up eventually about equal owners till the time my father passed away. Then my brother and I had equal shares in the business.
Okay. What was it like for your family to have such a hugely successful business like this?
Well, it was so interesting to all of us because there were lots of problems connected with it, but also we dealt with so many interesting people, both in the yacht business. One of my favorite people of all times was Charles Kettering of General Motors, Boss Kett. He and my father were very dear friends. He was the most interesting man I've ever met, a real genius. And then, of course, when we got into the Navy, we met all of the top military. All of that was so interesting, and of course working with that many men was also a real experience. We had a great group during the war. They really went at it and did their job.
Okay. And it's hard for a lot of people, especially younger people, who have no idea what Defoe Shipbuilding Company is, and it's such a big part of the history of Bay City and the Bay Area. And I'd just like to read this little quote I read in a book just to give you an idea of the impact that Defoe had. It said they were a major contributor to the Allied effort to break the German submarine blockade in the North Atlantic routes, allowing vast amounts of supplies to get to England in preparation for D-Day. So this was your ships were all over the world. This is very important, and it really put Bay City on the map for Defoe Shipbuilding. And now I'd like to talk about the rollover, a revolutionary method that really changed the face of shipbuilding. Could you tell us what is the rollover?
Right. It's a little hard to describe without drawing pictures, I think. But yes, my father developed this when we were building these patrol craft. These ships were 173 feet long, so they weren't rowboats. We started out by laying the main deck flat on a form on the ground, which was designed to fit the shape of the deck, and then built the hull of the ship bottom side up. That gave us a lot of advantages. One of the primary ones, electric welding was a relatively new trade at that time, so welders were simply not available. It was easier to train a man to weld downhand than it was to weld over his head. So by building the ship bottom side up, we performed half of the welding downhand while the ship was bottom side up. We rolled it over and did the other half downhand when it was upright. This meant much better opportunity to get men that could do the work, and it was a real time saver, man-hour savings, and that was so important during the war. It was copied later by a number of other yards. It only works when you have a mass production. It's not cost effective for 1 or 2 or 3 ships. You have to have a large number of ships to make it worthwhile.
So it saved a lot of time and man hours. Why wasn't the rollover patented?
Well, that's for the reason my father didn't want to patent it. He felt that it was so valuable to the country that anybody who wanted to use it, let them go ahead and use it, gain the same benefits.
That's great. Do shipbuilders still use that technique today?
Yes, yeah. There's one of them who used to be a competitor of ours who kind of tries to claim the invention of the process now, but they didn't even exist when we did it. So.
Okay, and your father passed away in 1957. When that happened, you and your brother took over the business, is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
We'd both been there, of course, a number of years at that time.
Okay, and then the whole yard closed down in 1976. Why did it close down?
That's correct. For lack of business, and this was actually, it was a worldwide condition at that time. I guess that it had been overbuilt. Well, in this country, the Navy construction was cut way back. Mentioning that, so it was President Carter's time, and while he was a graduate of Annapolis, he did more to reduce the size of the Navy than any other president that I can recall. So we had no prospect for orders, none at all, and that had to lead to our shutting down, which we were very sad to have to do.
Okay. What impact do you think that Defoe Shipbuilding had on the shipbuilding industry?
Well, quite a bit. During the war years, we were noted as the low-cost builder of both the PCs and destroyer escorts that we built, a larger ship. So, of course, that was a benefit to the whole country. We were lead designers for the PCs, so we supplied plans and information to other following shipyards, so we think we helped out in that case too. It was just overall a very successful effort, I would say.
Okay. What do you think of shipbuilding today? Is there a lot of similarities between now and when you had your business?
There are a lot of changes, but sadly there are also a lot of reductions. There are very few major shipyards left now. Again, the demand isn't there. The Navy work has dropped off again, very decidedly dropped off. Commercial work, there's not very much of that. So I can't give you a count of the number of shipyards, but it is so much less than it was in those days. It's not a major industry anymore. To me, it's a bit of a worry. In case of a real requirement, a wartime type of requirement, we would have an awful scramble in this country.
Okay, and aside from being modest, could you tell us some of the awards and accolades that the Defoe Shipbuilding Company got?
Well, quite a number. The highest award that the Navy can give to a manufacturer is a Navy E award. That's a flag for excellence. We were, I think, about the first shipyard in the United States to get the E, and then it was renewed 5 times, so that was as many as it could possibly have been renewed. So we felt very happy and proud about that. My father, at the time, at the end of the war, received a presidential citation from President Truman for what he had done. So on the whole, we thought that our reputation always has been very excellent in the business.
Okay, and lastly, what was Defoe Shipbuilding most proud of?
I don't know if there's any one thing. A lot of things. The overall effort during World War II, that was, of course, our busiest time. Also, when we built in later years the guided missile destroyers, I would still say that those ships were the most involved, most difficult and complicated product that ever was turned out in Michigan. Nothing else has ever approached the difficulty of building those ships. And our reputation was just great. They were highly thought of by the government and by the Australian government, who we built for.
Okay, well, I'd like to thank you, Mr. Bill Defoe, very much for coming in today. It was really an honor. And from Defoe Shipbuilding Company, a big part of the history of Bay City for about 70 years. And it's good to know the history of your city and your county and your area. So stay tuned to Bay 3 TV. We're going to have a couple shows about the history of the Bay Area. So thanks for tuning in to Bay 3 TV. I'm Kelly O'Loughlin.